ce que nous allons essayer de faire dans le cadre de cette table ronde, c'est de demander aux différents panélistes de cette table ronde de nous décliner les enjeux, mais surtout les propositions de pistes de solutions pour que nous ayons un levier central de l'autonomie sanitaire en Afrique. Donc, pour simplifier les choses, on va demander à chacun d'essayer de répondre à cette requête. Nous allons commencer par le premier panéliste. Le premier panéliste sera le docteur Krishna UDAYAKUMAR de Duke University, of the Duke Global Health and Innovation. Dr Kumar dirige plusieurs organisations et programmes dans les domaines de l'innovation en santé, de politique de santé mondiale. Il est également directeur d'innovation de healthcare et à l'université Duke, il est professeur de santé mondiale et membre permanent du corps professoral. Il préside également le comité des priorités mondiales de l'université et ses travaux ont été publiés dans des revues académiques de premier plan. Donc nous vous demandons, Dr Krishna, de bien vouloir répondre à ces différentes questions. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here with you and the audience. I might start by thinking about why this topic is important. Of course, when we talk about research and development, and as you laid out, Prof, it's an essential driver both of economic prosperity as well as to improvement in health across populations. And we know that there's a strong return on investment to research and development, but equally we know that it takes a long time and a lot of money to see that happen in most economies. And as many countries start to shift from commodity-based economies to knowledge-based economies, investments in research and development are going to be necessary for that transition to happen. If we look at the global landscape of research and development across sectors, there's almost $3 trillion a year being invested, but it's very concentrated. The United States and China make up over half of all R&D investments in the world. And when you add Europe, you're well over 70% already. So there's a very concentrated mix of sources of public and private capital. And the other thing we should take into consideration is the strategy for research and development really should be driven by the goals of that government. So for example, if it is to strengthen a knowledge-based economy, you have to build much more of the research capacity over time. Whereas if it's to strengthen sovereignty and health security, it perhaps needs to be more of a manufacturing base and less around development of novel or innovative products. And if it's really about research and development to improve health of populations, then there needs to be much more focus on the care delivery system and investing in innovation in the delivery environment to make sure that innovation actually reaches those in need. And we know if we study the different economies that they've taken different approaches. You can look at India and China where they started with manufacturing of commodities and eventually over decades are now producing and researching some of the most innovative products out there. So that's been an evolution. If you look on the other hand at Singapore, they started with a national strategy in the year 2000 and said we must become a biomedical innovation hub in Asia and invested tens of billions of dollars, created millions of square feet of laboratory space, recruited some of the greatest scientists from around the world. So they very quickly accelerated innovative research because that was their goal. Now, I'm from Duke University in North Carolina. We have our own history. The Research Triangle Park in North Carolina is the world's largest life sciences park. It has more than 380 companies that are there now. But this is a 60-year story. So way back in 1960, 3 research universities, the state government, and industry got together to really make a mark to say this is going to be the place where research and development happens in the future, because we have access to talent from the universities, we have access to capital from the private sector and industry that's coming in, we have access to make sure that we are developing the right policy and regulatory environment for this to succeed, and that's now been wildly successful in terms of the path forward. So one lesson perhaps to take away from that is really to think about what's necessary if we need a comprehensive ecosystem around research and development. And it starts first and foremost with government leadership and strategy, to be really clear that an approach to research and development maps to strategic goals of that government. And of course, public investment is almost always necessary for research to take off. Second, private sector is incredibly important. If you look at the US, the National Institutes of Health is the single largest public financer of biomedical research, $45 billion a year. And yet, the private biopharmaceutical industry puts in almost 4 times that much every year. So public investment can unlock private investment in much stronger terms. You also have to have academic and research institutions. That's where the human capital comes from. That's where the research infrastructure often lives. So you really have to invest in the human capital over long periods of time for this to work. You, of course, have to have a policy and financing environment. We'll learn much more about the regulatory side. But I do want to note that as countries start to invest in research and development, they start to ensure that they actually increase protections for intellectual property rights. We've seen this in India, we've seen this in China. So over time, if you want to create novel products, protecting intellectual property rights seems to go hand in hand. And the last things that you need certainly are the data system. So I'll maybe lay this out to come back to as an opportunity that if we think about data science as the future basic science as opposed to biology and chemistry and the other ones that are also necessary now, what might we do in terms of driving future biomedical innovation through data science, artificial intelligence and the like? And when we apply data science into the care delivery environment, we can really think about creating different health systems than what we have today. So rather than rely on registries and parallel systems for clinical trials as we have for decades, if we can create the true learning health systems of the future, we can embed clinical development into those systems and really unlock an efficiency agenda as well. So I'll end there and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you very much, Krishna. I think you just put it into perspective that this is a long-term game to get to sovereignty for global health R&D. But you elaborated about different models. And I think Africa needs to choose which one is appropriate for our continent, but also for our specific financing. You mentioned about public-private partnerships and policies and data science. So we'll come back to that as we open up questions, because it would be good to elaborate a little bit more about how do we elaborate on data, but also artificial intelligence to drive progress. I'm going to stay at the global level and turn to Michael MAKANGA as we start thinking about funding and funding for accelerating sovereignty. EDCTP has been the champion of Africa sovereignty in strengthening the capacity for clinical trials. Can you tell us a little bit more how you are thinking about this term of sovereignty for R&D? What are the problematics and what are the things that we have to think about, and what are some of the potential solutions in terms of both funding, capacity strengthening, but also driving impacts, because R&D is ultimately about saving lives?
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to give you my perspective of building African sovereignty and taking into account where we are and taking the angle of leveraging what exists to be able to deliver more, better value with what is available. When you look at the research and development funding landscape right now, currently about 17% is coming from the local financing. About 83% is coming from outside sources of funding for research and development. Now, how do we make the best of this situation, especially at a time like this, when we are having countries changing their positions on international funding? We are for, and I'm advocating for, blended financing. And I want to share a little bit about the model that the program I lead is implementing. And this is the model that is used by the Global Health EDCTP. This is a model that makes use of resources that are coming from the member states, both from Africa and Europe, and uses this to leverage funding that is coming from the European Union, and at the same time, leverage funding that comes from the private sector, and this includes philanthropic organizations, small and medium enterprises, and other private donors that may be involved in this. What is key here is the principles that govern the cooperation that happens here. Principles that respect equity, principles that respect mutual respect of cooperation, and principles that respect sharing of benefits. And in this case, I want to start off with at the point of developing shared leadership and ownership. In this case, our governance is inclusive. The European and African countries have equal say in the decision making. They have equal say in the priority setting. Additionally, we pay special attention to developing of local scientific leadership and ensuring that all the activities that are funded ensure they have a local scientific leader. The other bit is now taking it to the level of the strategic research and innovation agenda. This is developed taking into account bottom-up the real needs that are coming from the countries, but also the top-down, looking at the global concerns where there is need for policy input, so that this also feeds into, so that whatever is supported has local relevance and global utility. The other aspect is now coming in on the way that capacity is developed, developing the infrastructure in the countries to ensure that they're able to do the same level of quality studies as it would be done elsewhere. And I'm glad that the World Health Organization has embraced this in the clinical trials ecosystem guidance, promoting for an ecosystem approach of developing capacity for interventions that takes into account the cross-disease, and interdisciplinary approaches. The other aspect that comes here is to respect the ethics and regulatory environment of the countries where this work is happening, and also to respect the intellectual property aspects that go with this. Now, coming to the benefits, to ensure that the work that is supported really benefits the local people. The work that is supported, the products that come out of it, they reach the population that are at need. And this is where the access clauses are very critical. But this can only happen if you have research leaders in countries that understand the value of defending these core values of the countries. And this is the approach that we are advocating for, to have that cooperation that promotes the local funding with international funding to come in, to have the blended way of having work done. Over.
Merci, Dr. Michael MAKANGA, pour avoir partagé avec vous l'expérience de DCTP et surtout en matière de renforcement de capacité et de renforcer la contribution endogène des pays africains. Nous savons, pour avoir été un des pionniers, vous-même et moi-même, dans le cadre de la création de DCP, de la contribution considérable et des progrès considérables que cette organisation a permis de mettre en place. Vous avez parlé encore une fois de cette capacité et nous allons demander au docteur John Matabete de l'Université de Pretoria, qui est le responsable médical spécialiste en santé publique et médecine préventive et vaccinologie, de nous dire, selon lui, quelles sont les mesures à mettre en œuvre pour renforcer la capacité de recherche-développement en Afrique.
Thank you, Prof. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this forum. In terms of developing capacity in research and development in Africa, for us to be able to have the health sovereignty, we need to invest in the people that can actually do the research. We are fortunate as Africa because we have a young and vibrant population. So we do have a pool of people we can bring into the research space. What needs to happen is to look at our undergraduate curricula to ensure that there is a component that speaks to clinical research. The earlier we stimulate interest in young people, we'll have a potential to have more people interested in joining the research. We should also look at our postgraduate qualifications to make sure that we have research dedicated qualifications. We only started recently to have master's degrees in fields like clinical trials. Other countries are far ahead. We need to ensure that across the continent we invest in such training. To attract other professionals who are already working, we should leverage on virtual training platforms where we can introduce research qualifications which people can do whilst they are still working, so that the pool of potential researchers can grow. We should also look at increasing the enrollment in PhD because clinical research requires people to be highly skilled. So more people graduate with PhD will have more experienced researchers that can actually look at our needs and translate them into interventions that our countries require. We also need to ensure that we put funding for postdoctoral research opportunities because once you are qualified, you still need opportunities to even grow further. We need to intensify mentoring programs. This forum, there are a lot of people who are experienced. We have young people here. We should be able to link the young researchers with the people who can mentor them, because as a researcher, you continuously have to develop, and mentorship becomes very important. The other aspect relates to exchange programs where our countries and our institutions can share resources because we have different expertise across the continent. If we have more exchange programs, we'll be able to develop more researchers. This human resource capital, once we have developed it, we need to find a way to retain it. If we do not define a career pathing for these researchers, we are more likely to lose them to private as well as other countries. So we need to come up with competitive remunerative packages as well as other incentives that will ensure that our countries can retain these skills. With regard to other capacity, infrastructure, that speaks to having surveillance systems that can be able to pick up imaging threats is very important. We need to work with the Africa CDC to make sure that our countries are having working surveillance systems. We need to invest in laboratories that can process specimens that come out of clinical research. We should not rely on exporting specimens to be processed. On the same note, we need to invest in biobanks that can actually manage the specimens. We need to ensure that we have data repositories that can actually be shared by multiple countries so that we can develop interventions that our countries require. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. South Africa is one of the exemplars in terms of financing, but also South-South collaboration. And thank you for really emphasizing that need for thinking about what we can do on the continent, but also bringing the young people. I'm going to call Dr. Peter George Harper to intervene, but before he does, I'm going to turn over to Professor Kumba Touré. Professeur, on a parlé beaucoup plus du rôle des jeunes dans l'innovation, mais le rôle de la femme dans l'innovation et la souveraineté est particulièrement important pour le moment, surtout quand on voit qu'il n'y a pas assez de recherches qui vont sur le problème de la santé de la femme, mais aussi qu'il n'y a pas assez de participation des femmes dans le leadership de la science. Quelles sont vos perspectives sur les enjeux et quelles sont les solutions qu'on peut envisager, les solutions pratiques pour accélérer la souveraineté?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bonsoir à tous. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi de remercier les organisateurs de ce forum pour l'opportunité qu'ils nous offrent cet après-midi pour parler de la place de la moitié de la population mondiale. Les femmes ont une place dans la recherche et pour cela, il faut que les femmes aient un environnement favorable. Qu'est-ce qu'on entend par environnement favorable? Tout d'abord, il faut qu'on arrive à lutter contre tout ce qui est préjugés et perceptions pour promouvoir l'égalité de genre dans tout ce qui est institutions de recherche et dans nos universités. Il faut également que les structures de financement comme EDCTP, j'ai mon ami à côté, qu'on puisse vraiment favoriser le financement de la recherche des femmes. Comment ces femmes puissent avoir accès au financement, comment on peut créer des services de mobilisation de ressources aussi bien en interne au niveau de nos pays, dans nos universités, mais également au niveau international. Le collègue a dit tout à l'heure, les femmes ne sont pas visibles. Il faut qu'on arrive à mettre en place au niveau du continent un réseau de mentorat des femmes pour que les femmes soient beaucoup plus visibles, qu'on ait des rôles modèles, que les femmes puissent accéder à des sphères de décision, qu'on puisse demander un quota dans les institutions de recherche, dans les universités pour que les femmes soient à des places de décision pour pouvoir prendre les décisions qu'il faut. Dans les formations doctorales, il faut aussi qu'il y ait un quota de femmes qu'on puisse pousser pour qu'elles soient à un niveau assez élevé. Et dans ces formations, en plus de la formation scientifique qu'on donne à ces femmes, qu'on puisse également leur donner des soft skills pour qu'elles puissent savoir comment négocier, comment communiquer et demander aux médias de montrer les femmes modèles pour que ces femmes servent de modèle aux jeunes qui vont venir. Et ce qu'il faut aussi, il faut qu'un environnement de travail soit un environnement de travail favorable. Il faut qu'on exige à ce qu'il y ait dans les universités, dans les institutions de recherche, des crèches qui peuvent aider les femmes mères à avoir leurs enfants à côté et continuer dans la recherche. Et vraiment faciliter la recherche à ces femmes. Parce que si on vient au niveau de l'université, à l'entrée à l'université, les enseignants sont là, ils pourront confirmer ce que je suis en train de dire. Les premières places actuellement dans les premières années universitaires sont occupées par les femmes. Pourquoi ces filles et ces femmes qui sont excellentes n'arrivent pas après la formation initiale à devenir vraiment les leaders au niveau mondial sur le plan de la recherche? Il faut qu'on puisse favoriser un écosystème qui pourra permettre à ces femmes de pouvoir exceller. Et là, ce qu'il faut aussi que, au niveau de toutes les étapes de la recherche, que les femmes soient au premier plan. Par rapport au partenariat avec le privé, il faut également que les femmes soient au devant et qu'on puisse, dans les recherches, favoriser un type de recherche qui se fait en France, comme les thèses de type chiffre, où vraiment c'est des contrats avec les industries et les femmes peuvent leader ces contrats de type chiffre. Les femmes peuvent avoir une allocation dans le cadre de la recherche et répondre à une problématique qui est là et qui est réelle. Donc vraiment, nous devons tout faire pour favoriser la visibilité de ces femmes qui sont excellentes. Il faut qu'elles aient un environnement favorable pour pouvoir contribuer au développement de notre continent. Parce que le problème de notre continent devra être solutionné par nous-mêmes. Nous devons apporter les solutions qu'il faut. Et en termes de capital humain, nous avons le capital humain qu'il faut. Il faut juste qu'on ait un environnement favorable pour avoir de l'excellence et que l'Afrique soit le moteur du développement en termes de recherche et de développement. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Kumba. On va revenir bien sûr sur ces quotas, mais aussi sur comment est-ce qu'on peut transformer l'environnement pour que la femme, pour toute sa carrière, ait les opportunités de diriger sans pouvoir payer plus de prix que les hommes dans la science. I'm going to turn it over to you, George, just to give us your perspective on what Africa can do in terms of really driving the sovereignty agenda for R&D, and what can we do globally to accelerate that. Over to you.
That's so kind of you to invite me. It's been a huge pleasure to be here, and the panel I find absolutely outstanding. So I've come to sort of give you a cry of reality, because you don't have that much time. You think with a young population you do have time, but those diseases of tomorrow are happening today. And they already, you will see your changing lifestyle, your urbanization, the change of diet towards faster foods and processed foods. Everything is going to impact on you, and unless you make some changes now, including exactly what you've been talking about, good trials, well done throughout Africa to help change the attitude of the population, you're going to end up with a Western level of disease. And that disease is breaking every health service that there is in the mature world. Everybody's seen what's happened in the National Health Service. So when we talk about health sovereignty, we often think of independence. But in truth, real sovereignty in science and health requires interdependence. And that may be continent-wide, where every nation is working together, or of course worldwide. It's not isolation that builds strong, resilient systems, it's partnerships, the kind of partnerships that strengthen capacity, transfer knowledge, and respect local leadership. And that won't be built by copying Western models, but by cooperation and co-creation. You've got to have a shared purpose. So this is a cry for really basic thought on this, how you're going to work together. You've seen how it works in vaccine therapy. You have the Institut Pasteur, which has done so much for the yellow fever vaccine. You've got everything that you've done in terms of genomics now and pathology, a real move in pathology, continent-wide. So you need to move to co-ownership of research where discovery, application and benefit are shared, ensuring that the regions that generate that knowledge also directly share in the rewards. And those rewards are jobs, education, and transfer of those skills. So it is investment that you need. You've got to invest in the infrastructure, in the training, in the ethics, and in local governance. In people, not just in projects. And I think that's very important. A few weeks ago, we gathered in Paris to relaunch the Paris Charter Against Cancer 2025, which is a vision for cancer of the future, where you have to take on board all these aspects of left-behind populations. And as you move forward with your aging population, and you will quadruple your over 60s quite quickly, you're going to move forward to disease processes. So harm reduction, which is looked on and frowned on in many quarters, I'm very passionate about, and you can, two sides of the same coin are harm reduction and prevention. You're going to have to move to prevention. You're going to have to look at your salt in your diet. You've got to look at your hypertension, your cardiovascular disease, and you have to look at all those things that inflammation leads towards more cancers. So all of that means you've got to work together. So your continent has everything going for it. It's got a wonderful population. You'll double your population by 2075 or a bit earlier. And you really need to all work together. Thank you.
Merci de cette contribution. Vous avez mis en exergue des problèmes importants de partenariat, des problèmes de co-création, des problèmes de découverte, de partage et surtout insister sur l'importance de la population en Afrique. Mais pour cela, il faudra une réglementation et c'est pour ça que nous allons faire appel à Madame Fabienne Benoît qui est au DNDI, chef des sciences de régulation pour les maladies négligées. Et nous allons lui demander de nous parler de la réglementation et de la régulation dans la recherche et le développement en Afrique dans le contexte de la souveraineté sanitaire. Vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Déjà, je voudrais m'excuser auprès des Français. Je vais switcher en anglais, parce que j'ai moins de mal à parler anglais quand je parle de travail. So, sorry. But at least I have a French accent, so it should be easy. Okay, so, yes, the NDI, for those that don't know, it's a research and development organization, and we are working in partnership. So I think we are an example of a successful platform, let's say. And what was said during the lunch, that partnership, it's exchange. We learn each other. So this organization is is in place for 22 years, and we have a strong focus on neglected disease. What we mean with neglected disease is more neglected patients, so a lot of focus on tropical medicine. So saying that, we have collaborated in research and a lot of clinical trial. About 20 clinical trials per year, so for 22 years, so it's quite a lot. And we took the opportunity to train a lot of people. So I'm setting the scene just to explain that we have some experience with a clinical trial in Africa, Asia and Latam, but a lot in Africa. So I think this is what I'd like to focus. Before that, maybe regulatory. I heard a lot on regulatory. Regulatory, it's a problem. Regulatory, it's hurdles. Problem with regulatory. In fact, I will never say that. Regulatory is a chance. What does it mean, regulatory? Regulatory, it's the science. It's regulatory science. It's a way to ensure that the population, the people that receive a drug, receive safe, effective, and quality medicine. Without regulators, the population is at risk. So I will say that it's a chance. Having regulators, strong regulator, is a chance. So I'm very proud of working in regulatory affairs for about 30 years, and it's never boring. It's amazing. And if you want there is about, when we talk about regulatory, it's 8 functions at the end. It's not only registration, it's not only inspection, it's ensuring that the clinical trials are run effectively with a standard as is expected for the quality and safety of the patients. It's, of course, registration of the product to make it available for the patient, but it's also market surveillance. It's to ensure that the counterfeits are not circulated. It's testing the product when it's already in the market, before, after. So it's really vague, it's huge, and that's why it's amazing and very interesting. Then, saying that, so you understand that you need a strong regulatory system to ensure all what I say. And worldwide, we consider, this is WHO numbers, that about 70% of the national regulatory authority are inadequate to ensure safety for the patient. And in Africa, it's even more. It's 85% that are not adequate. But it was 90 some years ago, so it's much better. We talk about the maturity level 3. It's an assessment done by WHO to evaluate if an health authority is reliable, well-functioning. We say that Africa has 9 health authorities assessed as maturity level 3, which is considered as already a good level. In fact, it's only 8 for medicine. South Africa is not ML3. So 8 from the 54, it's really not a big number, but it's better than it was two years ago. So the implication having not a strong system is that we cannot ensure that the drugs are of quality, that the population receive quality drug. You have, of course, a high risk of substandard and falsified medical product. I think you all know that especially in Africa, it's a big issue. The regulator will not be prepared for the next pandemic, the current pandemic. And you talking about sovereignty, it's pending on the assessment, the approval, the evaluation from other health authority. So if health authority in the country are not able to ensure quality drug safety for the patient, some other needs to do, means you are dependent on other. And very often it's from the north, which is an issue when it's of neglected disease, the tropical medicine, because sometimes the north has no interest to develop a drug, for example, in sleeping sickness. So it's very important that the country gets sovereignty, and strongly we believe at the NDI that is possible because we are running clinical trial, and we have shown that it works. We have run clinical trial in Guinea, in DRC, in Tanzania, in Malawi. So it's in a lot of countries. I think the good example is we have 2 products that have been, the study, clinical trial has been done in, for example, in DRC. And the data were so strong that it allowed the preparation of a dossier, and the dossier was approved by US FDA and EMA. So the expertise is here. But you need to convince sponsors to come and run clinical trial in your country. And for that, the health authority has to be strong. And the requirement has to be harmonized. It's really difficult to run a clinical trial when it's a multi-site, means several countries, even multi-continent. We have some study running in Asia, in Africa. But if the requirements are different, it's a nightmare. So it may explain, or I think explain why sometimes the sponsors are reluctant to go. So strong regulatory system is important for your population. It's important if you want to have a new product developed. We are running clinical trial for new product, not for generics. New entity, innovation. Innovation will come only with strong regulatory system. So we have to think continental. I think it's a sentence from I heard this morning from Professor CDB. Think continental, but act locally or regionally. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't expect. We see very often requirement specific for each country. It's not possible. When you are running a clinical trial multi-site, it's not possible to have a requirement one per country. So please understand that you don't have to, you need to rely on expertise from over, you need to ensure the high standards are there. And sometimes it's not a problem of money, of resource. Just rely on what has been done. Don't create a new format. Just use the, and I think the African Medicine Agency is a chance. It's amazing that this agency is now in place. It will allow, it's a platform for all countries in Africa to collaborate together. The future, the way to be strong is to be together. Thanks a lot.
Great. Yeah. So thank you very much. Clearly, quality is important, safety is important, and we have to do this globally, but we also to create opportunities for reliance models. So we can come back to that. So we're going to go back to Dr. Professor Roda, who is Dean of Makerere University. You've heard about human capital, all that happens at the university level. Public-private partnerships happen also at the university level. And execution, implementation research, they all happen within the university. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what role universities can play in accelerating sovereignty and R&D? But also, how can Africa, as we've had, think about models of respectful partnerships and shared benefits in the R&D processes that we are involved in?
Thank you. The roles of the universities, but first perhaps just stepping back to mention some of the broad issues that and the context within which we are working as part of the broader ecosystem for R&D is, I think what we've had throughout this conference is issues around the disconnect between the burden of disease and the challenges that we are facing, whether it's the fragmented health systems and the evidence available. And that is very much the context within which a university within Africa is working, whether it's the alignment with the funding and the direction it's taking, because ideally we should be having a comprehensive outlook to aligning the knowledge that we generate, not only the training, but also the knowledge that we generate with the actual challenges that our societies face. We should be reorienting our training, for example, to fit within the direction we are taking. If we are talking engaging communities, are we getting our students and young people out in the community to learn? What does it take to do that? And if we are thinking, preparing scientific leaders across the entire production value chain, whether it's the basic sciences, whether it's preclinical and clinical studies, across the entire value chain, what does the ecosystem actually truly support? So as we think about the role of the university, ideally it should be centered around the key three pillars, which is train and appropriately train and prepare the individuals that are going to do the research and do it well at that. Whether we are talking about regulatory, are the programs that we deliver aligned to that? Do we even have any courses aligned to that? So for all of these pieces, we need to be aligned in terms of how we prepare the human resource. But the challenge is, again, the disconnect between the funding, the support, and what we can do. So you might say we have lots of support maybe coming in because we want to produce epidemiologists right now, because we are focusing on being more prepared, doing better surveillance, detection and response to infectious disease threats. But we are now talking about self-reliance and production. Are we actually supporting that? Have we reoriented to support the universities to do that? So yes, there is preparing the workforce. There is also thinking about the evidence that we generate and looking at what should ideally be the research agenda, not only for the continent, but specific to our countries. But then again, that comes with a constraint in terms of who funds what research. So we end up perhaps skewed to a few infectious diseases. You have the neglected tropical diseases, neglected by all of us, including the research. So there is quite a number of issues there, but we should ideally be producing the relevant evidence as well, and having an agenda that aligns with where our countries are going, having an agenda for research that also aligns with the continent, and thinking through also the, again, there's the ecosystems within the universities. Krishna talked about the ecosystems a lot. And when we look at the capacity building we've been doing, it's been at one point largely focused on skills of individuals. We're not thinking about institutions in terms of their capacities. What policies do they have? What systems and infrastructure do they actually have to be able to do this well is an area that we probably need to think about as we engage on the role of the universities. But there's also the entire ecosystem around universities at national level and regional level. How does that support what the universities do? For example, we've been talking about data and taking advantage of big data. You might talk about clinical data sets. It might be data sets from the climate and environment spaces or wherever else it might be. But what infrastructure, what policies do we have at national level to enable a university in Africa to do that? The policies around open data are basically, catching all of us very unprepared. Who is going to access that data and use it when we open up? And we don't even have the infrastructure to store and manage our own, clean it, manage it so that it's usable. And all that starts at country level. Many countries in Africa don't have policies for that. So as we think about the roles of the university, whether it's workforce or whether it's research, we need to be thinking about that in tandem with what policies and what frameworks do we have to enable the universities to actually be able to do that. And even the models of teaching that we are doing right now, that's part of the challenge. If we are going to train problem solvers, we are not going to sit them in the classroom in 4 walls and constrain them there and then release them to solve problems they've never interfaced with. So ideally, we should be training our people in the community to engage with the real problems they are going to solve and get them to solve problems even as they learn. But those models of training also come with challenges. We have to be intentional around the policies we want at regional level, within countries, and that goes with the policies we have in the education sectors and within the health sector. And so we need to really think about this comprehensively, because yesterday as we were talking as deans at our dinner, I thought, are we really fit for purpose as education institutions to deliver within this space of moving towards self-reliance, moving towards production? Because we might be teaching people to do the total opposite of where we are headed. So that is an area that we need to think through in a very broad sense, what the educational policies should be, how we should deliver education, and how we should deliver research. And I hope that will keep on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. I think you're calling us to really rethink universities and their role to be fit for purpose. You are also calling us to rethink about the ecosystem and how we fund the universities so that we can be responsive to these issues. I think we're going to open up for questions, and then my senior Professor MBOUP is going to conclude. Questions, just introduce yourself quickly and address your question to any of the panelists. Let me see by show of hands if there are questions. Comments, suggestions, recommendations, things that we did not think about? Seems very quiet. I'm going to ask this one. Okay, yeah, let's this one.
Donc merci pour ces présentations très instructives.
peut-être un commentaire à l'endroit de Michael MAKANGA, d'IDCP. Je pense que l'IDCP fait beaucoup de bonnes choses pour la recherche en Afrique. Évidemment, il y a des progrès substantiels qui ont été faits, mais c'est encore beaucoup à faire. Il y a des expériences en Afrique, si je prends l'expérience avec Delta, comme vous connaissez, le Delta Programme, Development Excellence Leadership and Training in Science in Africa. Il y a un nouveau modèle avec le financement de Wellcome Trust, qui est le principal bailleur, où effectivement il y a un glissement du centre de gravité. Si avant les fonds étaient gérés au niveau nord, au niveau de Londres par exemple, de plus en plus maintenant, il y a une prise de conscience sur le fait que ce sont les Africains eux-mêmes qui doivent gérer ces fonds. C'est ainsi que SFA, Science Africa Foundation, based in Nairobi, is dealing with. Et je pense que ce switch est extrêmement important parce que quelque part, on parle de la souveraineté sanitaire, mais d'un leadership également africain. Je pense que c'est bon de le mentionner. Le professeur MBOUP est un des pionniers dans ce domaine. Et c'est des exemples qu'on doit amplifier. Mais cela suppose également une bonne reconnaissance du statut de ces scientifiques au niveau de nos différents pays. Malheureusement, ce financement endogène dont on parle tant n'est pas encore là. Si on voit un peu la part du financement par rapport au produit national brut, il est vraiment très loin de nos expériences. Beaucoup de choses sont en train d'être faites. Il y a 4 jours, nous avons perdu, le Sénégal a perdu un scientifique de talent, vous le connaissez, Michael, le professeur Jean-Louis Ndiaye, qui a beaucoup bénéficié du support de TCP pour mettre en œuvre ces différents programmes. Mais sans le financement extérieur, il est évident que ces résultats, on ne pourrait pas les atteindre. Un réel leadership scientifique et un financement endogène, souveraineté, que ce soit pas seulement un slogan, mais une réalité. Merci.
Yes, no, thank you very much for raising this matter. And as I said, that in the approach that we are using, the mobilization of African countries to fund research is not lip service. They are expected to contribute both cash and in kind. Currently, we have 31 African countries that are part of the association and 15 European countries. And at the end of the day, the contribution that comes from both the European and the African member states leverages the contribution that comes from the Union. And at the end of the day, we want to use all sources of funding to empower the African researchers and research leaders, and also create that resilience that is needed in the institutions, the resilience that is needed in supporting the research, and the resilience that is needed nationally. And I want to use a very typical example of what we encountered in COVID-19. As you know, when COVID-19 hit, most of the countries pulled back their human resources. It is the people that had been trained and empowered in countries that actually took on the responsibility. And I'm proud to say that as a program, we've supported more than 3,000 postdoctoral individuals and individuals that are globally competitive, that were able to take things forward, even when things were cut off during COVID-19. The example I want to use is that looking at the disease profiles, you'll be surprised that neglected tropical diseases, work that was on neglected tropical diseases was more resilient during the COVID-19 than others. And part of this was because much of this work was integrated in the national health systems of the countries. And where were the resources coming during that time? We cannot underestimate the support that was coming in from the governments. So I have to say that we have to respect both the cash and in-kind contributions that come in from the countries, and where this exists, that we complement it to get better value out of it. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Serge Éolier de la Côte d'Ivoire, directeur du Centre de recherche en maladies infectieuses et pathologies associées. Quand je vois le sujet, je vais aller au-delà du financement. Je pense qu'on ne peut pas faire de recherche sans ressources humaines qualifiées. Et former un chercheur, ça nous prend 3, 4, 5 ans. Et juste après, l'essai thérapeutique, que ce soit EDCTP, NRS, quel que soit, le chercheur, s'il n'a pas de projet sur lequel s'articuler, part. Il change de pays, il change de topic, et ce n'est pas un chercheur. Un chercheur est focus sur sa question d'intérêt. On parle de neglected tropical disease, qu'on parle de HIV, qu'on parle d'integrated, il faut que les chercheurs soient focus. Malheureusement, on n'arrive pas à capter nos jeunes chercheurs. Et ils ne deviendront jamais de vieux chercheurs. Ils sont chercheurs de projets, chercheurs d'argent, mais chercheurs comme on veut les transformer, ils le sont. C'est important que le panel nous dise quelles solutions ils ont, parce que si notre souveraineté sera compliquée, parce que tous ces chercheurs partiront au nord. Donc la coopération sud-sud qu'on veut mettre en place ne marchera pas. Il y aura toujours plus riche que nous, quel que soit le financement que l'on aura, parce qu'on finance un projet, on ne finance pas de la recherche. C'est très différent. La recherche, c'est quelque chose de pérenne. Dans le même temps, en parlant des jeunes chercheurs, ça, ce sont les ressources humaines. Il ne s'agit pas que des hommes, hein. Il y a les data managers, c'est toute une équipe de recherche. Quelle est notre souveraineté dans la recherche en tant que propriétaire de nos données scientifiques? Ça, c'est un autre problème. Parce qu'on peut faire un projet, moi je fais des projets, mes données, je n'en suis pas propriétaire. C'est le promoteur qui est propriétaire de mes données. Et ça aussi, il faut qu'on se pose la question de la souveraineté des données. Et c'est un élément essentiel. Je pense que le panel peut peut-être y répondre avec l'expérience qu'ils ont.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, moi, je pense que ce qu'il faudrait dire aussi, je suis entièrement d'accord. Je pense qu'il faut penser, développer la culture de la recherche. Ce que nous constatons, c'est qu'il y a quelques années, nos pays n'avaient pas l'habitude même de planifier. Nous avons fait tous un effort sur le développement des capacités en planification. On constate aujourd'hui que dans la plupart des pays, avant de mener quoi que ce soit, les acteurs du secteur de la santé, en tout cas, et c'est devenu maintenant banalisé et c'est devenu systématisé. Ce qui manque, c'est la culture de la recherche pour différencier les différents niveaux de recherche. Les acteurs qui travaillent sur le terrain, si nous les avions préparés à la culture de la recherche, ce qu'ils font tous les jours feront l'objet de protocoles de recherche simples, de recherche-action, je l'ai dit hier, de recherche personnelle, pour qu'ils ne démarrent pas les activités quand ils finissent d'élaborer un plan ou une politique de santé sans penser à intégrer la recherche. Cela leur permettra de voir vérifier est-ce que ce que nous voulons faire, il y a l'efficacité souhaitée, etc. Toutes les questions qu'ils se posent peuvent faire l'objet de recherche. Donc moi je pense qu'ils génèrent beaucoup de connaissances, beaucoup de données, mais c'est parce qu'il n'y a pas la culture de la recherche qu'on a une vision souvent ésotérique de la recherche. La deuxième observation que je voulais faire, et je vais profiter pour poser une question à Rhoda, nous avons travaillé avec elle il y a quelques années et pour faire des recherches multicentriques. Et nous voyons que ces recherches multicentriques entre plusieurs pays peuvent donner des résultats extrêmement intéressants. Nous appliquons le même protocole et on se rend compte que si nous n'avions même pas de financement extérieur, on aurait pu nous-mêmes le faire avec les moyens du bord. Je voulais demander maintenant, est-ce qu'elle pense qu'une telle approche pourrait être pérennisée pour que nous, les 4 pays qui avions travaillé ensemble et qui avions produit des résultats fantastiques sur beaucoup d'aspects et qui ont fait l'objet de plusieurs publications, moi je me suis dit que c'est des choses que nous pourrions penser promouvoir dans la sous-région pour que la collaboration sud-sud puisse être aussi dans le domaine de la formation à la recherche. Parce que nous avions profité, nous, de ce projet pour former beaucoup d'acteurs sur des éléments simples de la recherche. Et comme vous l'avez même constaté, nous avons fait énormément de publications et de publications de factures, alors que ça n'était pas, à mon sens, quelque chose de très coûteux. Voilà, merci beaucoup.
Je crois que s'il n'y a pas d'autres interventions, il y a une dernière. Allez-y.
Hi everybody, thank you for the nice presentation. My name is Ousmane El Diallo. I'm the technology platform manager at IPD. I'm also a biobank manager. My contribution is about the fact that you mentioned research is not funded enough, and I want to put that it is possibly an issue to mutualize the platforms. So a lot of institutions invest a lot in the platforms. You have sequencing platform, biobanking platform, cytokine technology platform, but it might not be easy for the researchers to work on those platforms if they are not reaching a certain level of technicality. Researchers in Africa may not have the same platforms that researchers in the North have. In your talk, you mentioned the fact that we need to have level up the level of contribution of the researchers. I need to ask from your institution, how much do you use this platform to be mutualized and to be used and shared with the community? Because in my mind, it could be possible that a student can bring samples to an institution that is close and to do the work. Would that be an option?
Voilà, merci. Je crois que c'est la fin des questions. Nous allons demander aux différents panélistes, en concluant, d'apporter des réponses à ces différentes questions, s'ils ont des contributions. En commençant par vous, madame, vous pouvez répondre à une ou plusieurs de ces questions. Vous avez à peu près chacune 1 à 2 minutes pour nous permettre de conclure.
Okay, thanks for the excellent questions. I just wanted to comment on 2 things before the question that was directed at me. One, that yes, we've had a lot of excellent local partner initiatives with different names geared towards empowering institutions in Africa and other low and middle income countries to lead these grants, but we see a shift on the ground right now because of the geopolitical challenges we are going through. In fact, we worry that this could reverse the progress that we were making, and I don't know how many of these we will sustain, because as we read through some of the emerging policies from some countries, it looks like it's actually totally upside down right now. So that's something that I hope we can keep on the agenda. I also think that researchers are not just looking for money. Actually, many young people want to stay here in Africa and work here. What they are looking for is a good ecosystem within which they can thrive. So one of the areas we need to be thinking about, especially in research and institutions and universities, is to have good policies and systems that can support and anchor our young people so that they can stay with us. They can look for the money, but they can actually work here. If we provided a good environment, it's much more than looking for money. We need to think about it in a broad sense. Then in terms of the nice network that we had, I think it was really a good model because we've done this in a network of universities in 13 countries. We've also done it as a network of universities in 4 countries. We had colleagues from Sheikh Anta Diop, as well as DRC and others. And this was a partnership between the university and the Ministry of Health. We didn't work in isolation. So we actually utilized a lot of data available within the Ministry of Health to analyze it, because quite often the ministries have lots of data they don't use. They have questions that they can answer with that data, but they don't have the time, or they just haven't focused on it. So we used a lot of that available data. We designed the questions together with them. We interpreted the data with them. the impact in terms of shifting actions, policies, implementation was very quick and very evident because of the model that we used. We also learned a lot across countries because we immediately shared the data with the Ministry of Health for what was happening in their country, but we also shared what was happening in the other countries so that they could also learn from the other countries, and including borrowing policies from other countries that were delivering results to do quick adaptation. So that work was really very good, and it also yielded plenty of publications. I think now there are more than 25. We didn't have an external partner from Africa, outside Africa. So it's not that the Africans won't publish or they won't do their own work, and we do appreciate the Gates Foundation for funding that work. It was really excellent, and it's a model I would advocate for when we want to learn across countries, but when we also want immediate action and changes by the various actors when they are involved. I think it's also sustainable because it wasn't very huge funding for each of the countries, but because we leveraged the data that exists, we also, in each of the countries, had each country lead their own work. We didn't have Makerere that was coordinating move to do work in Senegal or do work in DRC. We trusted one another and we supported each other to transfer the expertise so that each country could do their own work. I think for me that was the other really critical piece. But we also discussed the issues of sharing the benefits, the publications. We said Makerere is not going to be a senior author on a paper in Senegal. The Senegal professor is going to be the senior author. That was discussed outright, and we supported each other to be able to write up our papers. So it was a very transparent partnership, and there are many lessons there. So thank you for raising it.
Thank you for the experience.
Yes, thank you for all the questions and comments. 3 quick responses. One on the last question around research platforms. I think that's really critical to make sure that there are both efficiency as well as opportunities that come. And I think we see this everywhere, even in large research universities in the US. No single institution can have every research platform available at the same quality. So really thinking about a model of collaboration where there are centers of excellence depending on which research platform is developed, and in those centers you can then really invest in ensuring that you're reaching scale and leveraging investments into those platforms effectively. And absolutely, as you pointed out, making sure that learners have the opportunity to get access as well. Second, on data sovereignty, I think this is a really critical issue that needs much more urgent action than we're seeing. Years ago, we looked at countries across East Africa and West Africa at national data safety and sharing policies more broadly, and brought in experts from across the continent and other parts of the world to develop best practices and offer those to national governments as well. We're doing the same now in artificial intelligence. What we're seeing in almost every country in the world is that the application of generative AI tools is far outpacing any regulatory or legislative context of ensuring that there's safe, responsible, and ethical use of data. So data sovereignty for clinical research, absolutely, but also data sovereignty for what's coming next in an AI economy to ensure that that the way it's deployed is both responsible as well as safe. And then third, I think we heard several comments about the importance of the spirit of research, the culture of research, and just to emphasize full agreement with that. So much of what we see globally is that even when you offer training, if you take very well trained researchers and put them into an environment that's not conducive to research, you can undo a lot of very high quality training. We see this especially when we train clinicians and put them into a clinical environment where the clinical needs are so high, the education needs are so high, that the culture of research is hard to sustain. So it really is a structural challenge that I think almost every institution is trying to deal with.
Thank you. Thank you. Please.
All right, thank you. I would like to add on the comment that spoke about the importance of partnerships. There is a model in South Africa where the government together with private sector, developed an institute that today is able to produce some of the vaccines. They had to negotiate technology transfer to be able to develop the vaccines. So the partnerships are very important, and it's a win-win at the end of the day, because the industry that transferred that technology had preferential treatment in terms of the awarding of a tender, so that they can produce, they can supply the country for about 5 years. At the end of the day, the country as well still have that technology that they can use to produce vaccines for the country. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great. Please, Madam.
Yes, but I will say the clinical research we are running are not are long, and sometimes it's not the expertise required is not only disease specific. So if I take the example of the NDI, we have some people that are in the team for more than 10 years. What we try to develop also is, yes, multi-country sharing. We are working in a platform, as I say, partnership. So we exchange with our partners, we share the expertise, the resource. And also we are working on lesson learned. So we try to take the advantage of the knowledge known we share with other young population, etc. So what we're doing more and more, and we'll do really a lot in 2026, is to train the young generation from the oldest. So it's like expertise is not lost, because it's exactly a concern we have. Also have a chance of working in partnership is we learn from each other. So for example, we work a lot in DRC. We have worked years in sleeping sickness. Now it's getting to the end, not end yet, but then these people will work in filaris area. Some people are able to do. They are trained for specifically what is specific for this disease, and also they collaborate with the Swiss Tropical Institute or other organisms that are working in DRC. And to come back on what I presented, so in addition of sharing, developing the young population, I think in a way it's more you do, more you will be asked to do. Maybe that currently DRC has not a lot of studies, but there are still some. This focus a lot on tropical medicine. But if the regulatory system, the health system is stronger, it will call for more. And I'm sure that there is an oncology cardiovascular need in this country. So if we have a strong system that we can demonstrate with what we have done, I think it will bring more research, so more opportunity for the people that have already worked. So I will say, be good, be excellent, as we are doing with DND. I think we demonstrate that we learn from mistake. We can always improve, develop the young population, and also show that we are doing, the country are doing good job within different, because the study are not only DRC, it's Guinea, etc. So we can really call for more.
Merci beaucoup. Michael?
Thank you very much. I'll speak to one point, and that is on the retention of expertise that is developed on the continent. Looking at our data, we've established an alumni platform of all the fellows that have gone through a comprehensive support system. And to our encouragement, more than 90% of the fellows actually stay in Africa. We've had situations where they may move from one country to another within Africa, which is also part of the consortia and the South-South collaborations that we've established. But the other point to note here are the indicators of success of the training, where one of the measures of success is how these individuals are able to attract additional resources beyond the funding they've received. And in this case, we are seeing more and more of the African researchers are aiming higher. Many of these have gone from smaller grants to more large and more comprehensive grants. And we've also had situations where they diversify, we are promoting the interaction, for instance, between infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases. And when we build expertise and infrastructure, in between the troughs of funding, they are able to do other studies that makes use, for example, the health and demographic surveillance systems that they may be working on to be able to address other diseases. The other element that has been helpful is also the approach of promoting adaptive clinical trial platforms. This is where these platforms can be diversified to, in a very comprehensive way, address other diseases and also make use of expertise and skill sets that are built within research teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Oui, merci pour les questions et contributions. Je reviens au problème de rétention. Pour retenir nos chercheurs, je le disais tout à l'heure, il faut un environnement favorable. L'environnement favorable, il est englobant. L'environnement favorable nécessite des infrastructures de qualité. Et l'environnement favorable nécessite un salaire et un plan de carrière. Généralement, ils sont dans les projets, ils sont bien payés dans le cadre du projet. Le projet a une durée de vie. Après le projet, il n'y a pas de possibilité de regagner la fonction. C'est une volonté politique, à mon avis. La culture de la recherche, elle est là, mais toute culture nécessite qu'on l'arrose et qu'on puisse prendre la culture en charge. Donc, ces jeunes qui sont là et qui sont extrêmement bien formés, il faut que nos gouvernants puissent vraiment mettre à la disposition des chercheurs les financements nécessaires et l'environnement de travail nécessaire pour qu'ils puissent rester. Qu'est-ce qu'on voit? Les chercheurs qui sont bien formés, ils sont au niveau africain, mais ils quittent leur pays d'origine. Ils vont aller dans d'autres pays où il y a des plateaux techniques performants, où il y a des salaires qui sont beaucoup plus attrayants. Donc, c'est à nous, au niveau national, de voir si nous voulons garder nos enfants chez nous, des enfants qui sont extrêmement bien formés et qui peuvent vraiment contribuer au développement de notre pays. Nous devons tout faire pour avoir un environnement de travail, un environnement de recherche favorable aussi bien pour les hommes que pour les femmes. Et pour cela, il nous faut renforcer la collaboration avec les entreprises. Nous ne travaillons pas beaucoup avec le secteur privé. Le secteur privé a des problématiques qui sont là et ces problématiques peuvent être transformées en questions de recherche et qui pourront aider les jeunes qui ont été formés et qui sont extrêmement bien formés, contribuer à cette recherche et participer aux recherches de développement, aussi bien dans l'entreprise, dans les institutions de recherche ou dans les universités. Donc, il faut qu'on réfléchisse par rapport à cela. Il faut aussi qu'on réfléchisse à valoriser les savoirs endogènes. Souvent, on ne valorise pas beaucoup les savoirs endogènes. Et ces savoirs endogènes sont des questions de recherche que nous pouvons développer et qui pourront contribuer également à la souveraineté qui nous est si chère. Par rapport aux données, si nous ne contribuons pas comme il faut à la recherche, ce que l'adage dit, qui paye, commande. Donc, il faut vraiment qu'on puisse faire des recherches de co-construction, qu'on puisse vraiment contribuer à ces financements-là. Nous donnons les ressources humaines qu'il faut, nous donnons l'environnement, mais il faut qu'on puisse, dès la négociation, c'est ce que je disais tout à l'heure, il faut former les gens à la négociation, que dès la négociation, qu'on puisse bien définir l'appartenance de ces données-là pour que les données puissent rester dans les pays où les recherches ont eu lieu. Et je suis entièrement d'accord avec la personne qui a proposé la mutualisation. On ne peut pas être excellent partout. Il faut vraiment qu'on puisse mutualiser les plateformes dont nous disposons au niveau continental, avoir des centres d'excellence, que ce soit au niveau sous-régional. Et ces centres d'excellence vont servir à toute l'Afrique. Et des agences comme l'Africa CDC pourront vraiment contribuer à la gestion de ces centres d'excellence. Des organismes comme l'EDCT pourront également contribuer au financement de ces centres d'excellence pour qu'on ait les équipements de pointe qui pourront servir à tout le continent. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Koumbatou. Président, si vous voulez lancer quelques mots de conclusion avant que je ne termine.
Absolument. D'abord, merci à vous tous qui êtes venus pour cette session. Merci à nos panélistes très distingués. C'est vraiment un grand honneur pour moi d'être parmi les géants de la recherche en Afrique. Je me rappelle toujours, il y a 20 ans, on ne pouvait pas parler des choses comme ça. Donc, on a autant fait de progrès, mais il y a aussi beaucoup de difficultés. Sur l'aspect des régulations, je pense qu'il y a des progrès, mais on doit faire un peu plus sur l'aspect de reliance model, mais aussi éviter un peu d'être dépendant des régulations du Nord et voir comment on peut être aussi respecté à les institutions africaines. J'ai entendu parler de blended financing. Et, je pense que dans les situations dans lesquelles nos pays se trouvent, on doit engager les privés, on doit engager les philanthropes, on doit trouver le moyen d'être efficient et aussi d'utiliser les plateformes qui peuvent être mutualisées. Donc ça, ce sont des recommandations très précises. J'ai entendu dire que les universités doivent être réformées pour répondre aux besoins du pays, mais aussi pour être partie de l'écosystème. Et, cher Président, je pense qu'il y a aussi un grand lancement aux chercheurs comme vous, de diriger avec l'alignement des priorités du pays. Et je pense que la souveraineté, tout le monde l'a insisté, c'est l'interdisciplinarité, c'est la solidarité, et on doit voir comment est-ce qu'on peut faire plus de South-South collaboration.
Merci. Donc, je voudrais à mon tour, en arrivant au terme de cette table ronde, remercier d'abord les organisateurs de ce forum. Je crois que ce forum est devenu un élément vraiment incontournable et qui se bonifie chaque année. Je voudrais remercier le professeur Amari Kolsek, mais remercier également tous ceux qui sont à ses côtés pour nous permettre d'avoir cette opportunité d'échanger chaque année. C'est aussi une très grande qualité. Je cite toujours ce forum comme un modèle d'organisation qui s'enrichit, je le répète. Je voudrais aussi remercier vraiment les intervenants dans cette table ronde. Leur intervention était riche, leur intervention était pleine de réflexion. Et je voudrais aussi vous remercier, vous le public, d'être resté, et surtout la qualité qu'on a vue de votre contribution. Nous avons remarqué, pour résumer, que ce thème de la souveraineté ne sera jamais maîtrisé tant qu'on n'aura pas notre propre maîtrise endogène de la science, de la technologie et de l'innovation. Qu'il nous faudra investir dans la recherche, pas dans les projets de recherche, comme vous avez dit, mais il faut qu'on change d'option et que quand on pense investir dans la recherche. C'est fondamental et merci de l'avoir souligné. Je voudrais aussi dire que nous devons d'investir dans la recherche. Nous devons aussi de valoriser, comme l'a dit le professeur Koumbakan, dans nos différents savoirs locaux et d'autres, et surtout renforcer nos institutions scientifiques pour les amener au meilleur niveau. Et surtout, nous devons encourager nos jeunes chercheurs. Et ceci n'est pas un luxe, c'est une stratégie. Et elle va nous permettre de faire des progrès. La science est fondamentale et un levier d'indépendance, un levier de développement durable et un moteur d'émancipation collective. Donc je voudrais sur ces mots conclure en vous souhaitant une très bonne fin du reste de l'après-midi et vous dire de rester pour la cérémonie de remise des prix du Forum Galien. Je vous remercie. Nous avons essayé de tenir dans les délais, malgré la richesse du panel.